Detroit Pistons Media Day has officially wrapped up. And man, look, there is a lot to talk about here. I don't think we'd even be able to fit it all in today's episode, but we're going to talk about as much of it as we can in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I am your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. And if you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way.
I spoke with you
to support
recently
the podcast.
about your off-the-dribble shot creation.
Look at that. Before we even get started, I'm over here playing clips before I even want them to be played yet. There's so much to talk about. Even the video couldn't wait. But before we get into all that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. So, like I mentioned, Media Day just wrapped up. I was there. Super excited about it. It was a fun time. Really enjoyed it. But this is one of the media days where, I've said in the past that some media days, you get a lot of coach talk, you get a lot of coach speaking, you don't get a lot of revealing stuff. Today, there was so much stuff I feel like said today and so much stuff to talk about today that we're probably going to have to stretch this out to multiple episodes, like maybe even throughout the whole week. There was so much said by so many different people and so many different things to talk about that let's just get right into it. So I think by far, I was trying to figure out which one, which topic was the most important to talk about. And there's multiple different things. Like I said, there's multiple different places we could have started. But I think probably the first thing that needs to be talked about, I think most people would agree with me, is the Ausar Thompson news. Now, we're going to start off in a sad spot, but I promise you the podcast is going to get on to being a more positive as the pod goes. But Trajan came out as soon as he sat down. He was the first person that talked with all of us. As soon as he sat down, he immediately gave his respects to NBA legend Dikembe Mutombo, who passed away today, which was just way too young. Terrible to hear that. But he said his respects for that. But then he also made sure to say he wanted to make sure everyone knew that everyone would be available for training camp tomorrow, but Ausar Thompson. Now, look, he did say a few months ago Ausar was cleared to do drills, and that is still currently the case. What Trajan said, and this is all he was able to tell us, he said he was allowed to do non-contact drills, but that's all he's allowed to do at this point right now for them. And that he said it's a league issue. They're currently working with the league. He said he couldn't go deep into it. He couldn't really talk much about it. But he said it's with the league now. They're communicating with the league to try. It seemed like to me, again, don't read too crazy into this, but my read on the situation from what he was saying, I felt like they're working with the league to get him passed or approved to play still. Ausar, we're going to talk about what he said a little later as well. We'll play the clips. But Trajan said he couldn't talk about it much at all. All he could say was he is doing non-contact drills. He's not going to be available for training camp, but it is a league issue, and they're working with the league right now on, whatever that is. He didn't dive into it. So that is definitely that's tough news to hear, because we did hear a few months ago that Ausar was going to be okay. It seems like he's still going to be okay, but let me rephrase that. We did hear a few months ago that it seemed like he was going to be ready for the opening night, and he was going to be ready for training camp. Now, obviously, blood clots is a very serious, health issue. So you want to make sure you have everything, working correctly. You want to make sure everything's, perfect before you approve somebody to go out there. And it seems like, again, it's more of a league thing. A league needs to make sure that everything is, you got the ducks in a row and everything's clear for him to come back to playing basketball. So we don't know when he's going to come back. He seems like, talking with Ausar, he seems very, energetic, very positive. He did say it's frustrating going through this because he just wants to play, but he seems like he's very, in light spirits and having he's in a good mood. And he did say that he's been working. So I guess that's where we're transitioning to. I don't have any news on when he'll, and when he'll come back, what's exactly going on. Trajan didn't reveal that much, just that Ausar is not going to be available tomorrow at training camp. So with that said, yes, that's not the greatest of news, but, it is what it is. That's the kind of thing that happens, and hopefully Ausar, passes everything. He's doing all right. He said he's doing all right. He says he feels great. So again, we'll see what happens. We'll see if it's just a league thing, if they're just trying to work through paperwork or protocol with the league, and then he'll be straight. Who knows? Trajan didn't reveal that much with us. But I do want to, transition this to talk about another part about Ausar, and then we'll talk about some other things later. Ausar Thompson, I was able to ask him a few questions, but one of the questions that really had me excited, this was probably one of my favorite answers from one of the players today. And I got to ask Ausar a little bit about his, give me just a second. Let me get this screen up here. Where is it? Here it is. I was able to ask Ausar about his ball handling, and about, is that something he's been working on, all that kind of stuff. And here was his answer, and we'll talk about it a little bit after.
Ausar, I spoke with you recently about your off-the-dribble shot creation. A lot of focus has been made on your shooting, but how much have you worked on your handling to kind of take on some of that secondary?
Now I'm starting to think, I don't think you guys can hear that. Hold on. Give me just a second. Technical issue. Give me just one moment. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Can you guys not hear that? You guys can hear. Okay, perfect. Thank you for the live audience. Live audience is a savior here, because we were about to have a meltdown live on the Locked On Pistons podcast. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and play this, and we'll talk about it afterwards.
That's all right. I spoke with you recently about your off-the-dribble shot creation. A lot of focus has been made on your shooting, but how much have you worked on your handling to kind of take on some of that secondary playmaking that you did a lot at OTE as well?
I worked on my handle a lot. I'm very confident with it. Worked out with my brother a lot. He's more on ball, but he was helping me with little things. But yeah, you're gonna see some handle this year.
There you go.
All right, so like you heard there, I was able to ask him a little bit about the ball handling, which is something you guys know if you've been listening to the podcast, that I've been really, pushing, because I really believe in Ausar as the secondary playmaker, as the secondary ball handler. And I really have said that I think it's something he needs to work on more than his shooting to unlock part of his game. This wasn't the only time he referenced it, but he did feel very confident answering that question. It seems like he really did put emphasis on improving as a ball handler this offseason. And whenever it is that he's cleared, hopefully it's by opening night. Hopefully it's, maybe even sometime in the preseason. But at whatever point it is that he's able to, join the team fully and be able to play games and participate in practice and contact drills and all that, hopefully whenever that is, we're able to see some of this, play out on the court, because they really do, if it's one of the things that if you looked at some of the clips I've posted on Twitter, I posted a lot of the clips as well on YouTube as well, in YouTube Shorts. But another one of the things that they really talked about, from JB to Cade to multiple different players, referenced especially JB. JB referenced this a bit, that they're going to utilize other people, within the half-court offense, playmaking-wise. And Jalen Duren was referenced in regards to that as well. But also, obviously, Ausar Thompson, and even Ausar, not just in this question I asked him, but in other questions that he answered, talked about how he worked on his ball handling and wants to be able to, utilize that on the floor this year. So whenever Ausar is able to play and return to the court full time, it will be great. I'm hoping that this work that he says that he did put on with his ball handling is something that we will get to see play out. But we don't know when. We don't know where that is. So when that's going to be, I should say. But let me know in the comment section down below how you guys feel about this. I know this was not the greatest news. Definitely not the greatest news to open up media day with. But again, Ausar looks and appears very healthy. He spoke about that he feels great. He said he doesn't feel held back. He's been working individually. He said he feels great, and that it is frustrating trying to work through all this process to get cleared again. But it seems like he's in good spirits. He's feeling great. And hopefully it's just a minor thing that they have to work out with the league, and he's back on the court soon. So let me know in the comment section down below how you guys feel about that and what Ausar Thompson had to say in regards to working on his ball handling this offseason, which obviously reactions to Ausar Thompson having to miss however much time it is until they get cleared from the league. When we come back, now we're going to talk about some other things, obviously, that happened at Media Day. And where I want to go with is, obviously, I think you have to go here, is Cade Cunningham. And there's actually another part to that we'll kind of, put with it that I think probably outside of this Ausar Thompson stuff, I think is the most interesting takeaway today from Media Day. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you got a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. I've told you guys this many times. A few years ago when betting became legal in Michigan, I didn't know where to go, didn't know what to try out, didn't know anything about it. But I tried out FanDuel, and I have not turned back since. What keeps me around? Super self-explanatory, super easy to use, and obviously the most important thing, super fun to use. So check out FanDuel today. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. Pistons season's back, man. They got preseason basketball, I believe, in about 5 days. Actually, I have the schedule right here they gave it to us. The first game is 6 days away. Sunday at Milwaukee is their first game, or at home versus Milwaukee. First preseason game. So just within a week away, the season's back. I feel rejuvenated. I'm happy that stuff's actually going on. I'm happy that things are actually happening. And look, this Media Day, like I've said throughout this podcast, there was a lot shared with us during this Media Day. We'll probably have to make multiple episodes on it. And one of the things I've seen some people in the live chat, again, if you want to be part of the live chat and part of the live recordings, hit that subscribe button to the YouTube channel, turn those notifications on. You'll be notified anytime we go live. We will probably be having a new intro for the podcast. Hint, hint, wink, wink, elbow, nudge, nudge. Because we did get a shout out. We did. We got a shout out from one of the Piston players. If they happen to watch this, JD, appreciate you. Jalen Duren, after he was done answering questions. Now, I can't play the clip because he did swear during the clip. So I'm assuming in the intro, when we eventually put it in there, which is my hope, we'll have to bleep that part out. But he did shout out Locked On Pistons. He said as he was leaving, he was like, yo, and I F with Locked On Pistons too. And, pointing me out. So I appreciate that. That was super dope from JD. And if you want to be honest, it's not what I want to talk about in the second segment, but I will briefly touch on it. It makes me feel a lot better, to be honest, about Jalen Duren improving defensively, because he says that he really messes with the podcast, and we have been pretty critical of him defensively on this podcast. Now, I'm saying his praises offensively, especially off the dribble, his DHO action in the half court, his ability to create for himself off the dribble, his finishing around the rim, his pick and roll. Like, offensively, we praised him. But I've been openly critical of his defense, and he acknowledged that at Media Day how he has to improve defensively. But it tells me that he handles criticism well. He welcomes criticism and uses it as motivation, and it seems like he wants to get better. He mentioned at Media Day he wants to get better defensively. So the fact that he was able, he says that he messes with the podcast despite the fact that I criticize his defense, tells me that he knows he has to get better defensively, and he doesn't have he doesn't hold any qualms about it. You feel me? So JD, if you happen to listen to this, come on, hop on the podcast. Great guest. I think everyone would love it. I appreciate it. You feel me? But anyways, let's move on to what I really want to talk about. We'll talk about Duren because there were some things there was something from every player. I'm telling you, we'll talk about this in multiple episodes. But there is something else that I think is more important to hit on here. And I know I said we were going to talk about Cade, but I want to move away from that real quick because this I think is more important. Numerous players, and when I say numerous players, I mean Jalen Duren, Isaiah Stewart, Marcus Sasser probably said it the most bluntly out of all of them. And to be honest, I was a bit shocked at how blunt Sasser was about it. But I respect it. I respect him being that brutally honest about it. But multiple of these guys that were here last year spoke about how these vets that they have brought in this year are completely different from last year's vets. And it didn't seem like they were like they did not care. Let me not say not care. I don't think they were meaning to purposely throw shade at the last year's vets, but it didn't seem like they hesitated or cared at all about if it did come off as shade, because it's just what they feel. It's what has been played out. Multiple young players came out and said, these vets that we're dealing with this year are way better than last year. I'm trying to find the exact quote from Sasser, because Sasser's quote was pretty revealing. I'm not going to lie to you. If I can just, where is it at? I just had it. I'll try to find it for you guys later. But it wasn't just Sasser. It was Stu. It was Ivy. It was Duren. They referenced numerous times that it isn't just about, they're not even, they weren't even referencing like on the court stuff when it came to the veterans. They were talking about off the court stuff. And I believe, I can't find the exact quote for Sasser. I so many tweets this. Oh, here it is right here. Thank you. I found it. Had to find this exact quote. Marcus Sasser said, this year's veterans feel, quote, different. Says this year's vets seem more, quote, into it, end quote, than last year. References not even on the court stuff, more so in the locker room, off the court. And he wasn't the only one to say that. Multiple players said they feel more locked in. They feel more bought in. They feel like this actually matters to them. Like they want to be here. They want to do this. And it wasn't just, even Trajan. At the beginning, they asked him, why did you sign Tobias? Why did you bring this guy in? Why did you bring that guy in? And Trajan said, well, first of all, and each one of them, he said, first of all, they wanted to be here. That's the first thing. I think even Cade referenced, it's cool to have vets that want to be here. And whether they purposely were meaning to throw shade at the previous vets, that doesn't really matter. The point being, these veterans are already having an impact on these young guys. And if you guys listened to last year's podcast throughout the season as the losing streak, I'm sure a lot of you guys, listened to during the losing streak. But I had said that I had heard throughout the year that some vets, just were not happy. And obviously, I don't think anyone was happy with, when you lose that much. I think a lot of people check out. Like, obviously, losing that much affects everyone. But I did hear that vets were, not necessarily wanting to be here and weren't necessarily bought into what was going on. Now, whether that was because of coaching issue or other things going on, there was a bunch of stuff at play for why maybe people checked out and weren't happy. But it did have an effect from top down on the roster and on the whole culture in general with Detroit. And to hear the players like a Cade, like a Marcus Sasser, Isaiah Stewart came out and he said that he felt like this year's team, that this front, he went out and said, this is his own words, not mine. He said he felt like this front office did the best job of putting together the best roster they played with from top down. He went on to reference not just on-court play, but the best veterans for us, the best fitting veterans for us. He feels like he's entering into the best season of his career in regards to the best built roster, top down. So the fact that guys were so openly saying this, like Sasser was so openly saying, yeah, it feels different. These guys feel more into it. That Isaiah Stewart was willing to come out and flat out say, yeah, I think this front office did a better job, building top to bottom, guys that actually want to be here and guys that actually fit with us. Like, I feel like this is the best, this is the best they've done. The fact guys were so willing to say this stuff tells me that, one, the veterans last year weren't doing their jobs. And I talked about it a little bit on the podcast. I think even some of the beat writers hinted toward this kind of stuff throughout the year. And two, that veterans have already had an impact. And the training camp hasn't even started. Even Tobias and THJ, Malik Beasley, they all reference that they've been around the guys before training camp. They've been with the guys the last few months in Detroit. They've been hanging out with them. They've been getting to know them. They've been taking them out. They've been working with them. They've been giving tips to guys. Like, these guys are really bought in on being veterans for this team. So I wanted to play this clip real quickly from Tobias. And just, I will say this before we play it, and then we'll move on. I couldn't even play the clips from Tobias on the podcast because each question he answered, he went on for about 3-4 minutes. And I said this on Twitter. I tweeted this out. Tobias Harris probably was the most impressive interview, the most impressive comments. One of the more impressive things I've seen in my 4 years covering this team for Locked On Pistons. Tobias spoke, each question he answered, he spoke with a level of awareness, with a level of pride in being a leader, with a level of want to be a leader, understanding what it is to be a leader, how important he is as a leader, how much he takes pride into being a leader. Each question he answered, you went on for about 2 to 3 minutes about, hey, this is how important a veteran is. I can do this, I can do that, and how they were important for me, and how if you want to improve, you need this, you need that, and I need to be here for these guys, and these guys aren't going to be good if I'm not here for them here, if I'm not here for that. And I thought it was easily the most impressive stuff we've seen in my 4 years here. Already you can tell that he is by far the best veteran, however you feel about his on-court play. He is by far, easily already, the best veteran this team has had during my 4 years covering this team. Easily, by far. Not even close. Just simply because it's of his want to it and his very clear commitment to being in Detroit. So I want to play this clip on his thoughts about Cade. There was another clip about why he came back to Detroit, but I think his thoughts on Cade that I recorded better reveal this, his determination to be a leader and how much pride he takes in it and how important he feels it is. So I want to play this clip real quick and then we'll come back and I'll give you my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been extremely high on his game, just his ability to be at that size at the one position. I think it's super key. And I think that I told him this year he's got to take that big step into really turning himself as one of the best guards in the whole entire NBA, right? And that happens through winning, and that happens through guys understanding that you're leading this team at the point guard position. But overall, I mean, he's a sharp competitor, wants to win, works his tail off, very good leader as well for a player at that age. Very mature for his age, and just a pro. He's a professional, and he has the ability to be a superstar in this league. And my goal is to make sure that he's pushed to that and held to that standard every day that he steps in the gym and comes out there on a basketball court to lead our team. And so I'm excited to be able to get on the floor with him.
So, I mean, even if you just listen to that, if you just simply listen to what he said there, and that the volume might have been a little low for that one. I apologize for that. But basically, if you just listen to what he said there, he talks about how it's my goal to get Cade here. It's my goal. What I want for this season is to get Cade here. My goal is to get this team here. My goal is to hope these young guys get here. And my goal is that, that's what he's saying with almost every answer he gave to the media was my goal is for these guys. Nothing he said was my goal is to be 20 plus points, or my goal is to show guys I can still play, or my goal is to do that. It was everything. My goal is for these guys. My goal is for Ivy. My goal is for Duren, Stu, Cade. That's all he spoke about with every single answer. So, look, I don't know how good this team's going to be. I'm not going to lie to you. After media day, it's hard to not feel more positive about the team because they talked a good game. They answered everything completely like the way you want them to answer the questions. But we'll see how good they are. I will say this, from Tobias to THJ to Malik Beasley, all the veterans sound way more bought in than last year's vets. Not only do they fit in better on the basketball court, we've talked about that before, but they are bought in off the floor with them. Malik Beasley had a funny answer. They asked him about him being a leader or whatever, and he said that Dennis Jenkins called him Unk the other day and almost went off on him. So, he was laughing. And, these guys already have a built-in relationship with them, and that is going to go so far for them. And they have guys that actually are rooting for them and trying to get them where it's their goal for them to be successful, not even for themselves to be successful. Their goal is to get these guys to be successful. So I think that's going to play big for the Pistons this year. It is a big difference, especially when the players are openly saying this before even training camps started. They're going out of their way to say, hey, we notice how different these guys are, how much they're helping us. and how important these guys are going to be for us. So I just think that was easily the most, outside of Ausar, the sad news with Ausar, was easily the most, insightful, interesting, good, positive stuff that we got today from Media Day. So let me know what you guys think about this. Again, we're probably going to talk about this moving on in other podcasts or as well, other episodes. I do have more clips and more things I want to play, but we can't play it all in one episode. Just let me know in the comment section or over on Twitter @KukaHill how you guys feel about what you heard from the vets today. Do you feel differently about the vets for the Pistons this year? How does that make you feel about the season coming up? Again, let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter @KukaHill. When we come back, now we'll talk about Cade Cunningham and some of the interesting things we heard from him this year from Media Day. So I've told you guys this many times. I'm a procrastinator. I wait to the last second with quite literally everything, and it screws me over oftentimes. But it is what it is. Habits. It's hard to kill old habits. But one thing that saves me is game time, because when it comes to buying tickets, I often get the worst prices. I get the worst seats. But with game time, you have last minute deals to any ticketing event or any big event you're trying to get to, whether it be a theater event, a sporting event, a concert, whatever it is. They have last minute deals, not only up to the start of the event, but sometimes even after the event has already started. So not only do you get good prices with game time, you also get the view from your seat within game time, which is big for me. There was often times where I'd buy tickets somewhere, I'd get there, the seat, trash, hate it. Now with game time, I can see right within the app, okay, is this seat for me? Oh, it looks dope. This is my seat. I go with it. Game time saves me from being a procrastinator. It also gets me the best seats and gets me the best prices possible. Also, they have a lowest price guarantee. Game time will credit you 110% of the difference. Also, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel @Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. All right, so I want to talk about what we heard from Cade. Cade, I thought I was able to ask him a question I thought was pretty interesting about his, not his free throw shooting, his finishing around the rim, and we will play that quote. But I think probably what more people want to hear about, and everyone's already freaking out with this clip. Like everyone is like, "Oh my God, get the season started already! I'm ready to run through a brick wall for him." We're already getting I'm already seeing a bunch of that with with this comment from Cade. And look, man, I get it. Cade, Cade's a franchise guy. When he's talking like this, he is going to, not only get the fans riled up, but he's going to get his guys, to try to, go with them. So I want to play this clip. This is Cade talking about, this is Cade talking about how he went to the Tigers game. He talks about how, seeing how fans react to the Tigers making the playoffs and rallying behind them on their playoff push. How that has him feeling in regards to the Detroit Pistons. So I want to play that clip real quickly for you guys, and then we'll come back, talk about that, and talk about some other things that Cade said that I thought were pretty interesting from Media Day.
It's a challenge that we definitely want to take on for sure. I was there at the game. What was that, Friday, when Tigers clinched? And so watching that, I'm in the building watching how the stadium was reacting to that. Gave me chills. So that's what we want to do for the Pistons fans, for the city on the basketball side is, we want to bring that same excitement, that same joy to the Pistons. So it's a challenge that we're all excited to take on. And, I'll be the head of that thing.
With that said,
it's a challenge.
So Cade, the part of that has everyone getting hyped, and I guess I can take that. I take that off the screen now. The part that has everybody, getting hype is the fact that he said, I'll be the head of that snake. And something that Cade said over and over during Media Day in different ways was he needs to be the guy. Like, this is the year, this is the year where he needs to be that guy. He's going to be that leader. It's on him. And he wants to be the reason why Pistons basketball comes back. He wants to be the leader. He wants to be the one to bring Piston basketball back. And seeing the Tigers, how fans rally behind them. I mean, even Tobias Harris spoke about this as well, that he's already spoken with Cade. He's spoken with other young guys because Tobias was on one of the only Piston teams that made the playoffs since 2008 in the 2016 Pistons team. And he said that he's spoken with them already about how surreal the atmosphere, how surreal the fan base was when they made the playoffs, the late push that they had to make the playoffs. And then in the playoffs themselves, how electric Detroit was and how electric the fans were and how electric their arena was. He spoke about all that. He said that he let the guys know. So it does feel like, I just wonder, because he wasn't the only one who referenced this. Jaden Ivey referenced it as well, how seeing these other teams do well in the city and how the fans are rallying behind them really encourages them to, hey, we want the fans behind us like that as well. What do we got to do? We need to get some more wins. Like, we got to do something. I do wonder just, how much of this is just going to end up being talk and how much of this is just going to be, whatever, like stuff you just forget about, and how much of this actually can motivate players. Because I'm sure people will feel differently on this. There's going to be split opinions on it, but I have to assume, especially for someone like Cade, when you see the lines and how, especially because in Detroit, if you're not from Detroit and you don't live in Detroit, all the stadiums for all the sport teams, they're like on this block. Like, they're right next to each other. It's literally just a big square of, like, in each part of the freeway, like on one part of the freeway, it's the Pistons arena with the Red Wings. And on the other side, you got the Lions literally right across from them. And then you got the Tigers right over. Like, it's all within a block. So when one team's doing well, like the Pistons, arena sees it. Piston players see it. When the Tigers are doing well, everyone sees it. Like, they're all around each other, rather than like back in the old times, like the Palace was way out there. Wasn't in Detroit. It wasn't around there. Like, so when one team's playing well, everyone sees it. When the Lions have a big game, everyone sees it. When the Tigers play well, everyone sees it. So it's all like this big environment, like this big block of an environment. So I do truly wonder how much seeing these other teams like really succeed and really have the backing of the fan base, and seeing how much the fans come out and just like push and support, because everyone knows how good Detroit fans can be when you give them something to root for. I really do wonder if it actually does give them motivation, actually does give them a legitimate boost, seeing like, look how much they're supporting the Tigers. Look how much support you're seeing coming around our stadium for the Lions, for the Tigers, for the Red Wings even. Like, you see how, like, I wonder how much this actually can help them. So you can't really measure that. You don't know. It could just be talk. Who knows? You can't really measure it. But I have to assume with how much players talked about it today, that they are using it as motivation. And I have to assume, or at least would like to assume, that it is something that can be used as, fuel and maybe give the Pistons a little bit of an edge coming into the year. So, who knows? It may just be talk. It's media day. It could just be talk. But, I'd like to assume that something like that maybe could give them motivation, especially with Tobias saying, I talked with them already about how electric this fan base can be when you give them something to root for. I witnessed it back then. It's great. Like, you're going to love it if you can just get there. So I have to assume that actually is an impactful thing. But again, you can't really measure it. It's not like there's stats or anything for that. You can't measure it. So we'll see if it actually does. I'd like to assume it does. The other thing I want to play from Kane, then we'll wrap up the podcast. And like I said, there's other stuff I wanted to talk about that we will talk about on future episodes. Like, throughout this week, we will be referencing back to media day, because there was a lot of stuff, like JP talking about what he wants to do in the half court. He referenced a lot of that. How he wants to unlike Jalen Duren in the half court. Jalen Duren talking about how he's going to be used in the half court. Like, there were a lot of stuff. Jane Ivey talking about what he had worked on. Like, there's a bunch of stuff we didn't even talk about yet. So future episodes, stay tuned. We're going to keep referencing back to this, along with some of the other stuff we hear from training camp, practice. Busy time this week. But I want to play this clip. I asked Cade. I had mentioned this on the podcast. I believe I had mentioned this last week on the podcast about him adding a floater. So I want to ask Cade, what are you doing to improve your finishing around the rim? And this is what he had to say, and then we'll wrap up the podcast.
Cade, you've mentioned working on your finishing around the rim in the past. What did you work on this past offseason to try to turn some of those looks maybe into some free throw attempts, easier looks around the rim, maybe work on the floater? What did you work on this past offseason to try to improve those numbers around the rim for you?
Yeah, the floater for sure. Worked a lot on my floater. And I think that's going to help me out a lot as far as not always having to jump into bigger guys or shoot as many contested layups. And then, of course, touching up as far as layups and all that, the glass and having all that be touched up. But the floater was a big one for me.
So I really enjoyed hearing that. I'm happy that I was able to get, that kind. Oh, where'd I go? Oh, there I am. Sorry about that, everybody. I was happy to get that from him because, look, part of the reasons why Cade struggles or his numbers at the rim are low, he doesn't draw enough fouls, which I know he's worked on. He doesn't draw enough free throws. And also because, like he referenced here, a lot of his attempts are tough attempts. So part of improving his finishing numbers, part of the solution to that can be just simply eliminating the tough ones. Like taking away the tough finishes that you're not going to finish and turning those into different attempts will raise your numbers around the rim. So like he mentioned, having a floater instead of having to put your body into a 7-foot guy sitting at the rim getting ready to block you, that attempt's going to be harder to finish. Turning that rather into a floater will improve your finishing numbers. Also, if you can have a reliable floater, which he's saying he really worked on having, will improve your overall efficiency. You'll become more dangerous at all three levels of the floor. I really hope he's improved or worked on his free throw drawing. I know that was something he went into the offseason working on, but his finishing on the rim is probably the biggest area that he has to improve on coming into this year. And adding that floater will help a ton because, like I said, it simply will take away the attempts that were extremely tough. Simply removing the tough attempts will raise the percentage because he's fine on good looks. He's fine. He's having a lot of tough finishes at the rim when he's trying to go through guys, trying to go over guys. He hasn't been that explosive at the rim, which is something else he's worked on. But adding a floater to remove those attempts and have a counter to guys that's kind of like waiting for you at the rim would really help. It creates easier looks at the rim. It creates easier looks for you on the floor, makes you a more dangerous type of player. So I'm really looking forward to seeing him utilize that in preseason. I wonder if he utilizes it, how much he does in preseason, and then how much he utilizes it during the regular season. So I really like that insight from Cade, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how much he uses that floater this upcoming year. But that's all I've got for you guys today. This episode did run a little bit long, but like I said, there was just a lot I wanted to talk about, and we didn't even get to half the stuff I really wanted to reference from Media Day. Jalen Duren, shout out Locked On Pistons, man. We moving up. Locked On Pistons community. Look, we going to the moon. You feel me? We going to the moon. All seriousness though, that was pretty cool. It was a dope moment. I didn't see it coming at all. So appreciate it. Appreciate the shout out from Jalen Duren. And yeah, man, I'm happy the Pistons season's on its way back. Real interesting stuff. It's going to be a busy week with training camp and preseason and more talk about this. So really looking forward to it, man. I'm excited to get started, get back on the season. So let me know in the comment section down below how you guys feel about Media Day, what you guys' biggest takeaways were. Comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. Hit that subscribe button to the YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. And until next time, I will see you guys later. Stay safe out there. Until next time, peace out.